So as we delve into these growing concerns as AI-driven deepfakes take center stage on the political arena for sure, following these recent instances that have been reported that involve prominent figures like Prime Minister Modi and Mandana as well, the government now is set to establish these new regulations. And these new rules could address the deepfake threat. The Union Minister Ashwini Vaishnav has convened a meeting with social media platforms. Also, AI companies have been in attendance and NASSCOM as well. Experts in the field, all of them gathering to discuss the possibility of putting in place these new regulations that could check this menace. The primary focus to address the challenge, of course, through initiatives related to detection, the prevention, the reporting, and of course, general awareness as well. Google, on its part, is assuring that they are actively working on building guardrails against this evolving technology, and the question now still looms: are deepfakes a clear and present danger to our democracy?
एआई के नेगेटिव यूज को लेकर चिंता बढ़ रही है। भारत की स्पष्ट सोच है कि एआई के वैश्विक रेगुलेशन को लेकर हमें मिलकर काम करना चाहिए।
Deepfakes have emerged as a new threat to democracy. So that's why we need to take very urgent steps to strengthen trust in the society and to protect our democracy.
The protection of our democracy is something that the government is underlining, but now can the government control the spread of deepfakes by tweaking or introducing new regulations? And what kind of rules do we see coming into play that can check this? And would the measures be justified in the first place? Let's discuss this. Nikhil Pahwa is joining us, the founder of Medianama. Nikhil, at the virtual G20 summit, the Prime Minister spoke about the consequences of unchecked growth of AI and the menace of deepfakes. How do you see the government now following that up with a stronger regulatory stance? And do you think it's going to be fair on their part to go after this with these new rules that is being talked about?
Thank you, Vikram. I think it's important that the government addresses the issues of deepfakes, because we're essentially heading into what might be India's deepfake elections, right? And it's important for democracy that we figure out ways of reducing the impact of deepfakes on our electorate. We will have a problem because it's becoming better, because AI tech is basically enabling creation of deepfakes that are better and more realistic in quality. It is becoming cheaper and faster to create these. And I think as we go along, it's going to become even cheaper, faster, better. So the scale at which this problem can disrupt not just elections, but also, for example, markets. Fake news has been around for a while. We should not forget that back in 2009, there was a fake news about Steve Jobs getting a heart attack, and Apple's stock price tanked for a brief period of time. Someone would have made a killing at that time, right? So this can have an impact on both democracy and markets. And the only challenge is how do you address it, right? Because you can point towards one video that goes up, and social media platforms can be asked to take it down. But if multiple copies go up, how do you take it down across the board? And then if someone modifies the video even a little bit, so for example, if you have a news show that goes up, and in the news show you post a deepfake clip explaining that this is a deepfake, will algorithms also be required to take that down? So how do you ensure that legitimate critique stays up? How do you ensure that minor modifications don't disable a video from being taken down? These are very difficult technical problems to solve. It's good for the government to say that they want to improve detection, they want to create a mechanism for prevention, they want to create liability for platforms if they don't address it. But frankly, no platform will be able to take down everything 100%. So we're headed into a very, very difficult policy making exercise as well. And I think there needs to be a public consultation and discussion on not just with policy folks, but also with technologists on how to address this problem. Just having a conversation with a room full of big tech companies is not going to solve this.
So At the policy level, to start with, Nikhil, under the Information and Technology, the IT Act, the construct of safe harbor. This construct protects platforms from being held liable for the third-party content that they host. So if users put out deepfakes, like you spoke, the platform is not to be held accountable or liable for prosecution under this part of the Act. Now, turning that part of the Act down, is that going to be the primary need in terms of law to start with?
I think it might end up being the primary mechanism for the government to use, but it's a very dangerous mechanism. So, for example, a platform cannot be held accountable for your tweet or your YouTube update or your LinkedIn update, because if that were to happen and it had to play the role of an editor, it would have to pre-screen your content. Newspapers do that all the time when they're publishing something, but on social media, it will lead to a mass censorship of speech, because platforms will then have to censor or look through everything, frankly impossible, in order to make sure that they're not liable. So let's be very clear about this. No platform can survive the removal of safe harbor. I know the Minister of State, Rajiv Chandrasekhar, has talked about the removal of safe harbor on multiple occasions, and he thinks platforms should be held accountable for content. But no, the internet will not survive this. So I think, do we want a world without social media is the question. Do we want a world without YouTube is another question, right? We want them to be there. We use those platforms. We can't let exceptions control the majority of content, which is harmless, which is actually useful, which is educational, so really we have to be careful how we tread here. But I also understand the government's challenge. How do you regulate the speech of 800 million connections, 900 million connections online? It's not possible for them to do it. So they're trying to regulate it through platforms. But I don't think platforms are really the bad actors over here.
Yes, but sometimes they are. And some accountability needs to come in, is what the government is coming in from.
There is
perhaps it acts as a deterrent. Wouldn't you concede that?
No, there is already accountability that platforms have. Platforms are accountable under the current IT Act, which say that they have to inform users that they should not impersonate others. The IT rules actually create a situation where if a user complains about impersonation, platforms have to act within a certain period of time, which is 24 to 36 hours, right? So the rules already exist, and it's just that someone has to go and file a complaint. How does a platform know that something is a deep fake unless it's watermarked as a deep fake? And then there's technology that exists to remove that watermarking as well. So really, a platform cannot act unless it's informed. Look, there are billions of pieces of content that are uploaded on the internet every single day. It's not humanly possible to police that content. The government can't expect platforms to do its job, right? The government has to police that content. Courts have to do it when there are complaints that are filed. It's very rare that platforms should be allowed to take suo motu action, because then they'll just start censoring everything, including, like I said, a news program where you are indicating that something is a deep fake.
Correct.
These are not easy questions.
Yes, no, I take that point. But what about technology to check on technology? How important would it be? Like you mentioned, besides the policy makers in such meetings, you need the tech folk there as well. How important would it be for India to get advanced detection algorithms in place that detect deepfakes and prevent their spread? That can cull out any data that seems synthetic in nature, to use good tech, perhaps to check the spread of bad tech?
No, so look, technology to counter technology is like an arms race. Every time you find a solution, someone creates a new problem. It's an ongoing exercise. So I think the only solution here is that to tell platforms to do what they can do on a best efforts basis, which is there shouldn't be liabilities only when they're guilty of gross negligence of not acting on something, that they should be held liable. But, so for example, if a clip goes up today and it's repeated across a platform, how do you expect the platform to identify each and every instance and take that down? And what if someone modifies one part of it, right? They can't do it. So technologists have to find a solution, but remember that those who are bad actors will then create a new problem for which technologists will have to find another solution, and it keeps going on and on. That's the way we've seen the
bad actors when it comes to talking about the threat to democracy. We are heading into general elections, and the fear is that these deepfakes could spread false narratives about candidates, influence voter perceptions, potentially sway elections as well. How big a threat is it? Which are the biggest risks we are taking on right now with the current state of affairs when it comes to deepfakes?
It is the biggest threat to these elections because, like I said, the creation of this technology is now better, faster, cheaper. And so anyone, anywhere can create a a really, really convincing deep fake. And the tools exist, the data exists. So, for example, the Prime Minister's audio through Man Ki Baat is available to everyone to listen to. That can be used to train something in his voice. That can be used basically to create an audio that is saying something heinous, but it's not him, right? You can morph his video to change the way he's voicing something in a more convincing manner. That can impact elections across the board.
Yes.
So we have to be look, it's very scary what we're heading into
Correct.
now.
Yes.
I don't want to be scaremongering, but we need solutions. But I think the solutions have to be such that everyone's acting in the best interests of citizens, of
Right.
users.
Yes.
And fixing liability for something that is impossible to get 100% right.
That's right. It is a huge challenge. There's no taking
away.
away from that, Nikhil. You have underlined the fact how big a challenge this is, and the government, at least sounding the right notes on this, is an important piece. But then how exactly do you get down to doing it, implementing these rules without really, shaking up the balance, as it were? At this point in time, we'll have to keep at it and keep watching the space. But thanks very much for joining us with your perspective. Always a pleasure.